Hello students, I'm Dr. Himanshu Kandpal, Assistant Professor English, Government MS College for Women, Bikaner. Today we are going to study the text of the poem Spring and Fall by Gerard Manley Hopkins. Introduction to the author. Gerard Manley Hopkins, born July 28, 1844, Stratford, Essex, was an English poet and Jesuit priest, one of the most individual of Victorian writers. His work was not published in collected form until 1918, but it influenced many leading 20th century poets. Hopkins is regarded by different readers as the greatest Victorian poet of religion, of nature, and of melancholy. Gerard was an English poet whose manipulation of prosody, particularly his invention of sprung rhythm and his use of imagery, established him post-death as an innovative writer of verse. Throughout most of his poems, the two main themes that dominated were nature and religion. Introduction to the poem Spring and Fall. Spring and Fall by Gerard Manley Hopkins uses a unique rhyme scheme and the concept of nature's demise as a representation of something much deeper. In this one stanza work, Hopkins utilizes the reaction of a young girl named Margaret to express a deep-rooted fear that humans carry throughout their lives, expressly that of their own mortality. What seems like a simple account of a girl grieving or crying over trees losing their leaves as summer months lead into the autumn season is eventually noted to have a much greater meaning. That meaning, as Hopkins note in the final line of the poem, is that Margaret is mourning the passage of her own life even though she is not mature enough to grasp the notion. Now we are going to start the analysis of the poem. Margaret, are you grieving over golden grove unleaving? Leaves like the things of men you with your fresh thoughts care for, can you? In the beginning lines of the poem, the speaker addresses to a girl, Margaret, who is crying at the fall of tree leaves. In this poem, a child named Margaret feels sorrowful on seeing the death and decay of leaves in the forest. Margaret, are you grieving over golden grove unleaving? It seems that it is a first confrontation with this phenomena in nature, and that is why she is sad and sorrowful. The speaker believes that the young girl, Margaret, equally cares for leaves like the things of man. In her innocence, with her fresh thoughts, she worries for the falling leaves, leaves like the things of man. You, with your fresh thoughts, care for, can you? Margaret, as an innocent child, separation is a great loss for her. But at present, she doesn't know the meaning of death because she is young. A child is out of knowledge of death and destruction and collapse. The speaker in the poem behaves as a philosopher. He is trying to persuade Margaret not to weep, not to mourn, and not to spare sigh when golden grove is unleaving. For the experienced person, golden grove unleaving is a minor natural process. So here the poet says that man who daily sees such decay everywhere do not feel sorrowful over this sight. The poet asks her if the sight of the fall of leaves has made her sad and sorrowful. So he here tells her that the leaves are just like man in this world. He says that such decay is a common sight in the world. It is so the case with all case of men and women. She is sad because she has encountered death and decay in the world for the first time in form of leaves falling. She is young, she is fresh, she is young and fresh. Men who have seen such sights many times are not affected at all by it. So, in this series of lines, Hopkins delivers the basic factors of the poem's setting. Margaret, who is noted as a young person when the narrator references her contemplations as fresh thoughts, is saddened by a golden grove where the leaves are falling from their trees to signal their end. Specifically, Margaret is being treated as an aspect of nature herself since her ideas are referred to as fresh. Furthermore, the notion that she is grieving over a golden grove is telling. A grove means a series of trees, and the idea that they are golden links the setting to autumn colors showcasing themselves on the leaves. The young girl is grieving for trees losing their luster through changing seasons. The concept of mortality is centered as a focal point to the poem's overall concept. Now we move further. As the heart grows older, it will come to such sights colder, by and by, nor spare a sigh, though worlds of vanwood leave me lie, and yet you will weep and know why. Here, the narrator in this poem assures the child that her heart will age and mature as the heart grows older until she is colder towards sights of nature's demise, so much that she will not spare a sigh for them once she is older. So, here the narrator says that even the when she is going to grow old, she is going to witness such sights of death and decay. Even the death of large forests will not move them. They have the world have grown so much used to it. When we analyze the poem line by line, we find that poem is an expression of grief on human mortality. The question here is extended to suggest that girl, though innocent, is yet capable of caring for things pertaining not only to nature but to men. The four lines that follow balance the first four lines and expresses the idea that as the girl grows older, her capacity to feel for natural things will diminish and she will not then sigh at such sights. So, the narrator thinks fondly of Margaret's youthful ideas but ultimately knows that they will not survive until her adulthood. It will come to such sights colder, by and by nor spare a sigh. The speaker knows what she does not, namely that as she grows older, she will continue to experience this same grief but with more self-consciousness about its real meaning. You will weep and know why, and without the same mediating and admittedly endearing sympathy for inanimate objects, nor spare a sigh, though worlds of vanwood leaf mill lie. This word vanwood is coined by the poet. Van means pale and wood here means woodland. Thus it means huge quantity of pale and decaying leaves lying on the ground. Leaf mill is the word again coined by the poet on the analogy of piecemeal. The word means leaf by leaf. So, when she is going to grow old, it is going to mark a turning point in his life. The line says that the cause of origin of she is going to realize that the cause of origin of sorrow everywhere is one and the same. The eighth outline is perhaps one of the most beautiful in all of Hopkins's work. The word worlds suggests a devastation and decline that spreads without end, well beyond the bounds of the Lytton Golden Grove that seems so vast and significant to a child's perception. Loss is basic to human experience and is absolute and all consuming. Vanwood carries the suggestion of pallor and sickness. Pallor means pale color. Uh, mm, Pallor and sickness in the world van, and also provides a nice description of the fading colors of the earth as winter dormancy approaches. The world, the word leaf mill, which Hopkins coined by analogy with piecemeal, expresses with poignancy the sense of wholesale havoc with which the sight of strewn fallen leaves might strike a naive and sensitive mind. Now we move further. Now, no matter child the name, sorrows, springs are the same. So, once more, Hopkins presents the reader with concepts that are linked to natural ideas, therefore, constructing a concrete representation of the human life through metaphor. In particular, human sorrow does not have storage, a supply, or some other generic method of expression. It has springs, and that choice of wording parallels sorrow's existence with that of a body of fresh water so very representative of nature. So what Hopkins here want to convey that here Hopkins reinforces the concept that Margaret will still mourn after she has reached adulthood, and states the reason for her future mourning will be the same. Now, no matter child the name, sorrows spring are the same. As a Hopkins also reinforces the concept that Margaret will still mourn after she has reached adulthood, and states the reason for her future mourning will be the same as a current dismay over the demise of the leaves on the trees. The name will be different. Now, no matter child the name will be different, which makes sense if the leaves will not so much as incite a sigh from her in later years. Later years means adulthood. But the underlying rationale for grief in either instance will remain unchanged. The question remains, though, as to what that underlying reason is. It is only in the last lines of the poem that the idea is stated so clearly as to remove any doubt. So, what the poet here wants to convey, that the source of all grief and sorrow is the fact of mortality for man as well as nature. Everyone knows this. However, none, however, give expression to this. So, the writer here feels that the cause of weeping resides in the knowledge that comes with age, being one who knows why he weeps. The last four lines of the poem: nor mouth had, nor no mind expressed, what heart heard of, host guessed, it is the blight man was born for, it is Margaret you mourn for. Here, the reader learns that the principal reason for Margaret's mourning has nothing to do with autumn plants or a field of trees. Rather, it is Margaret she mourns for. Essentially, though the child cannot understand the reason for her despair, the troubling aspect that sparks her tears is that one day she will die, and she mourns her own mortality. In the time she will knows this detail, but for now she grieves in the simple manner of having her heart touched by drying leaves. Nor mouth had, nor no mind expressed, what hard heard of, ghost guessed. It is blight man was born for, it is Margaret you mourn for. This is not something that Margaret should feel weak over, as the narrator knows that such is the blight man was born for. What is the blight? That man is mortal, he takes birth and dies, and this process goes on forever. The poet therefore concludes that the child, Margaret, weeps not so much over the falling of the leaves as over the fact of her own death and decay. Margaret weeps for herself. She grieves for the death of that individuality and distinctness which is symbolized by the figure and name of Margaret. Creating everyone is destined to leave life behind, and having fear, dread, or grief over the idea is rational and real. Even before a person is old enough to fully understand the prospect, enough to differentiate what she mounts for. So, overall, this poem is commentary to the fear and dread of death that is so integral to life. Young Margaret does not grasp that she has any kind of thought of her own mortality, and according to Hopkins, she will not have the understanding until later in life. The falling of the leaves is a significant factor not only in itself for what it symbolizes. What the girl is really grieving for the fact of death and decay, to which she too, like all nature as well as mankind, is finally doomed. But she is young, she is so fresh with her thoughts, she is unable to decipher the idea of death. But as soon as she is going to age, she is going to understand what death and decay means, and she is going to understand that man is mortal, he takes birth and dies. So the source of all grief and sorrow is the fact of mortality for men as well as nature. Margaret does not grasp that she has any kind of thought of her own mortality, and according to Hopkins, she will not have the understanding until later in life. Still, that heaviness in regard to mortality surfaces in details that she does grasp, like the leaves die in the fall. She recognizes mortality, and one day she will realize that her resistance towards it is connected to her own end. The child is emotional and ignorant regarding this loss. Where the speaker in the poem is poetical, philosophical, and generalizing something of a natural process which is really tough and vague to understand by an innocent girl. These are not all the ideas of the ideas of death and decay is not the little girl is not able to understand. It is not clear. He asks many questions to her, but when gets no result, then assumes answers and moves further. In real sense, when the child grows, she can take a journey towards fall or left to cross many hurdles and obstacles in her life. Then only she is going to realize the absolute truth of the human world. What is the absolute truth? That man is mortal. Then she can relate the falling of the leaves from the trees, and can relate the idea to the birth and death of man in this world. In the poem, we find there is a contrast between innocence and experience. The speaker represents the experience, where the child represents the innocence. Margaret has fresh thoughts, and such thoughts are indifferent to the idea of death and destruction. Similarly, the speaker represents fall and the child represents the spring. So, we can say that the series of balances and comparisons in the poem give it a calm but persuasive articulation, and the consciousness of all that is involved in knowledge and fall gives this apparently slight poem a great deal of weight. Now we are going to talk about the language and voice in the poem. The poem is written in couplets as a lyric in sprung rhythm. Hopkins experimented with a new kind of rhythm that is called as sprung rhythm. Sprung rhythm is used to imitate natural speech and is constructed from feet in which the first syllable is stressed and may be followed by a variable number of unstressed syllable. By not limiting the number of unaccented syllables, Hopkins allowed for more flexibility in his lines and created new acoustic possibilities. Each line basically has four stresses. Is that a tetrameter? It means it is a 4 feet line, and apart from the last line which only has 3 stresses. Tetrameter means 4 feet line with 8 syllables. There are other usual features of Hopkins poetry too. He make use of compound epithets in the poem. He employs compound and unusual word combinations. Compound epithets, alliterations, and some kind of internal rhymes. Golden Grove is a striking epithet, as is Vanwood, which contain layers of meaning. Worlds of Vanwood is an effective image for a sad world. Also worth noting is that this is the series of lines that shake up the rhyme scheme, whereas the lines before and after follow a AABBCC rhyme scheme. There are a trio of lines here that offer rhyming words, specifically lines 7, 8 and 9 that end with psi, li and y. Already this section has been noted as a transitional territory in that the narrator is giving commentary that is more future focused for this child, but this alteration of rhyme scheme solidifies that variation. This is the pivotal change, just like the distinctive change that the girl will undergo once she understands why she has to weep. So, in spring and fall, experience become understanding, and through the medium of language, the poet share perhaps the greatest creative process known to mankind, that is the enlargement of the consciousness. This is all about the poem Spring and Fall. Thank you.